Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the top 15 champions that I recommend for patch 1023. So this is the first patch of the preseason. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Check out the rest of the content as well. This is going to be my final role that I've looked at. So I already have support, AD carry, mid lane, and jungle by the time this gets published. So be sure to check that out. We're going to start off with an item analysis for probably about half of the video, just a bunch of the different items that you might run into in the top lane, and then we'll go into the champions. We'll spend most of our time talking about the tier 1, but we will dip into the tier 2 and some of the other interesting cases that are out there. So be sure to stay tuned for all of that. And then we stream every night on YouTube starting around midnight Eastern Standard Time, usually go till about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'd love to have you. Very friendly, chill community. We'll be trying out, a bunch of the new items, bunch of the new builds. So come by, check it out, ask any questions. I try to talk as much as I can with the chat while I'm playing about the game itself, but then also about League or anything else that you want to talk about. I try to be very conversational, very cerebral, and just keep a really fun atmosphere. So anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get in here. So I think the major theme that you're going to see, as you can probably see here from the tier list before we talk about it, is that tanks are really, really strong. And this is something that the vast majority of analysts got wrong. There were so many videos out there, all caps videos, that were saying it was going to be a mega assassin meta and that tanks were going to be absolutely terrible. And I just wasn't really convinced about that. I did think that tanks might be a little underpowered, especially in the support role. I still maintain that they are weaker in the support role outside of probably Leona. But in the jungle and the top lane, they're still going to be very, very good. So be sure to check out the jungle video if you want to know about tanks in the jungle. But let's kick it off with the tank items here. And this will be, kind of reiterating what we talked about if you watch the jungle video. But I just want to hit on what's making tanks top so good right now in general. So some of the biggest things are they buffed Bramble Vest in the top lane to where it's only 800 gold now instead of 1,000, and basically has the same stats that it had before. So now it's a super efficient item. That's about 700 gold value. So you're only paying 100 gold for Grievous Wounds and the Reflect bonus, which is quite significant in the early game. 10% bonus magic resist to the attacker applies Grievous Wound, which is kind of weird why it's... Oh, it's bonus armor turned into magic damage. Sorry, I was reading that wrong. I was like, what? But so just kind of by itself, it's going to reflect, 6 or 7 damage without any other stats. And realistically, in the early game, it's probably going to be reflecting about 10 damage, maybe even up to 13 damage. So very, very good in the early game. So that's a huge bonus. And there are so many things that heal out there right now. If you think about all of the runes, just all of the items, all of the built-in, parts of champion kits, whether it's Conquer, Ravenous Hunter, Eclipse, the Gore Drinker or whatever it is, and then like Fiora. There's just so many different champions out there, Darius, that heal. And so having that healing reduction be much cheaper is a really big deal. And then the Balmy Cinder changes is pretty massive as well. So it's only 1,000 gold now, gives 300 health, and then taking damage. I don't remember what the stats were of old, but that's already pretty good. So that's going to be about 800 gold worth of value in terms of the health. So you're paying about 200 for the passive, but it deals 15 plus 1% of your maximum health. So, in the early game, you have about 1,000 health, maybe a little bit more on a tank. You're going to be getting about 25 AoE damage per second enemies, and it's increased by 50% against minions. So very handy. Helps out with the wave clear. And that builds into the big mythic that I'll hit on. And this is, they have not nerfed this. They have not talked about nerfing this. But this item is tremendous. It's almost 100% efficient by itself. I think you pay maybe 300 or 400 gold for the Immolate passive. But this thing does so much damage. I looked at this just looking at Leona. And if you just rush this item straight up, when it gets fully charged, it was doing over 100 damage a second AoE to people around it. So not only does it have really good wave clear, and it has, just an awesome assortment of stats like high health, respectable armor, magic resist, and ability haste, but it also puts out like 100 damage a second by itself with no other items. At least in my testing, so that was pretty disgusting. And so That's the big thing is that, you know, tanks can put out a lot of damage now just by sitting around being tanks off of this Sunfire Aegis, because every second that you stay in immolate range of somebody, it increases the damage. So it can go all the way up to 72% extra damage. And then whenever you auto attack somebody near you, that it burns them for basically 100% additional damage on top of that for 3 seconds. So just a tremendous item. Super, super powerful. They're almost certainly going to nerf this because all of the tanks that get this item in the jungle and the top lane, or at least like the very top tier tanks, are going to be, you know, 55 to 60% win rate. It's very, very good. And unlike some of the other items that I talk about, that I sort of complain about a little bit with tanks, this is good all the time. Like, you don't have to have a special situation to counter what's going on. So one of my big critiques of something like Abyssal Mask is that, like, this is a really cool ability. You get 10% extra increased damage whenever you CC somebody, which is very good, but it's going to be a real feels bad if they have a bunch of AD. So it's like, thematically, the active that you're paying for doesn't necessarily match the stats, right? Because the active doesn't have anything to do with, you know, going against a magic damage team, right? It doesn't, like, heal you up over time, you know, to help you out against poke. It doesn't give you any sort of magic shield, or it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So you just have like this random passive on it that's very good into magic users, but is something you might want in terms of the passive, but could feel very bad against AD users. So it's kind of a poorly designed tank item, I think, but nevertheless, in the right situation, it's super strong because it gives your entire team that 10% extra damage. So if you're against magic damage top, like tanks mostly do magic damage, this Sunfire is magic damage, so you're probably going to get this in a lot of matchups, and it's probably going to be pretty good. But if you just happen to be against something that's physical damage dealing, you would not want to get it early. It'd feel pretty awkward. Versus something like Frozen Heart is a bad item because it has too much mana on it most of the time. But I think like the numbers are wrong on it, but thematically at least, it kind of makes sense. It's an armor item that also reduces attack speed. It's like, okay, makes sense. You would get this because you're against physical damage and you want to reduce the attack speed. So the stats and the passive that you pay for line up thematically and make sense. Same thing with Randuin's. You want armor, you want to lower attack damage, you want to lower critical strike. Makes sense thematically. But yeah, some of the other items are goofy. Now, I will say Bramblevest is very good, but I would not recommend completing Thornmail. I see a lot of people doing this, but you don't get anything extra out of this. I guess you get the extra grievous wounds. So whenever you CC someone, you get 60% grievous wounds. So I guess you are getting 20% extra grievous wounds out of it, but you're paying like 400 gold for this item to complete it. So it's like, yeah, you get more health, you get more armor, but you could just be buying something else. You could just get Bramblevest into Spirit Visage, or Bramblevest into Gargoyle, or Warmogs, or just something else, right? So it just doesn't make a lot of sense for me, for people to complete this, because you're only paying 100 to get the same effect, right? This does a base of 10, I guess, so it does have a little bit of stronger thorns, and then 10% of your bonus armor, so the bonus armor percentage is the same, but I guess you do get 7, you know, more damage per attack. So I guess, you know, that is worth considering. So I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but it just feels like, unless you really, really need the 60% grievous wounds, that I would just sit on Bramblevest and get something else if you need something else. But anyways, that's okay. But yeah, Frozen Heart's bad. Randuin's is situational. It's okay. Not a lot of people are getting it. Thornmail, pretty much everybody's getting it because Bramblevest is so awesome. Force of Nature's pretty garbage most of the time. Once again, the theme doesn't make a ton of sense. I guess against like dot damage, but you can only stack it once per unique champion. So if you're getting hit by a ton of magic, it can give you extra magic resist and movement speed, but like, I don't know why movement speed, like what that has to do with mages a lot. I guess like gap close on them because they're ranged a lot. I'm not really sure, but it's pretty bad. Like 99% of the time you want to go Spirit Visage. So they did lower the overall magic resist on Spirit Visage, I think from 55 to 40, which feels bad. But now it increases all healing and shielding on you, and that applies to items as well as to you know, incoming shields and heals. Now that also synergizes extremely well with Gargoyle. So if you wouldn't buy this stuff on Recon, but let's go ahead and just crank up some money here. So if we just look at, let's say you have Sunfire and then normal Gargoyle, just how much the shield's going to be. So you activate it. It's a pretty big shield, as you can see there. But then if you go and get Spirit Visage on top of that, it has the health, which synergizes with Gargoyle, but it also will give you 25% more shield on the Gargoyle, which is going to obviously be extremely powerful. So let's just speed this through. Okay. And now let's activate it so we get... Boom! Look at that. That's an insanely huge shield. So I think that's a combination that some people are experimenting with, but I think that is extremely powerful if you get those together. And then obviously the vast majority of tanks are going to have some kind of heal and shield. So this is very good on someone like Shen now, who did not historically want this because he didn't have any healing. But now you can comfortably get this on someone like Shen if you want, because he does have a good amount of shielding with his passive. So all around, I think this is a buff for the item, particularly for champions that are going to have a shield, or you have like a Janna or something on your team, or you're going to get Sterix would trigger a shield as well, a really big shield, or you can trigger it off a Gargoyle. So there's a lot of things that can give you a pretty decent shield, most notably Gargoyle though. So this item is actually very, very strong as a third or a fourth item. Let's see, it's about 2,400 gold for the armor and magic resist, and then the ability haste, it's like 400 gold. So you're paying about 500 gold for the active and the passive. But both of those are pretty good. So taking damage from a champion can stack up to, you can only get 1 stack per champion, but 3% bonus armor and magic resist. So even if you're at 100 on this later, which it's probably going to be higher than that, it's 6 resistances, which is about 120 gold value. So even if like in a team fight only 2 champions hit you, then you're still going to be getting about 250 to 300 gold minimum value out of that Fortify. And so you really, the active, you end up paying, especially later on in the game in team fights where you're getting hit by a bunch of stuff, you're really going to end up paying like potentially nothing for it, but maybe only just a couple hundred gold, even if you're only getting hit by a couple of people in team fights. So that shield there, that 100 bonus shield that decays over 2.5 seconds is good. And the decay seems to be a flat number, not a percentage. If you looked at that, there was a lot of this left at the very end. So watch how much is left before it just fully falls off. There's like 600 to 1,000 left that just got deleted in the very last second. So that means that I don't know exactly how it decays. I don't think they tell you, but it's not like it loses, you know, some flat percentage per like percentage of decay, right? So if it lasts for whatever 2.5 seconds, it doesn't end up losing like, you know, whatever that is, like 20% per second or something like that, or it doesn't lose 20% per half a second flat or something like that over 2.5 seconds, right? It looks like it's some kind of flat number. So the more health that you get, I believe, the more that you maintain. So if we get this here, let's see what this one looks like if we add Warmogs onto this. Just really quickly, and then we'll move on. But I'm just showing you just how powerful the Gargoyle interaction is with Spirit Visage. Look at that. Then it falls off. So anyways, very, very powerful interaction. So just a lot of these items like synergize so well with each other. A lot of these big ticket items. You have the Spirit Visage synergizing very well with Gargoyle, and then anything that had, obviously these are going to synergize like super well with either Grasp or Aftershock depending on what you take. And they all have a lot of health. So your Sunfire Aegis scales off of your maximum health. And then when all of these items have health and you get Warmogs, then you get the Warmogs passive turned on as well at some point. So there can be some very powerful builds with like Sunfire Aegis plus Spirit Visage plus Warmogs is probably going to be enough to get you at the 3,000 health on a lot of tanks, especially if you have like Grasp or something like that top lane. And then you could get Gargoyle Stoneplate after that. And that would have you covered for a lot of stuff out there. And then of course the Gargoyle extra healing is going to scale off the Spirit Visage healing as well. So there's just a lot of really, really good combinations out there that usually involve those items. So yeah, you have a good armor item here with Thornmail, a good Spirit Visage, you know, item. If you want the health and sort of resistance against poke, you can get Warmogs. Otherwise you can get Gargoyle, which is pretty much going to make you invulnerable to damage for, you know, 2.5 seconds. And it has a pretty good, well-rounded assortment of stats. Now, it is far more expensive than it was before, so I don't think this is going to be an all-the-time type of item, but it can be pretty good. And then Titanic Hydra on a lot of, like, big tanky type of champs, especially someone like Shen, is going to be pretty strong. One of the big notable trade-offs here that I'll mention, and we'll talk about this in the fighter section here in just a second, but Tiamat no longer has its cleave, so it doesn't have the active, or crescent, I guess, the active that clears the wave, but it does cost less. So yes, you don't have that really quick damage burst, but I think it used to be 1425, so you're saving 225 gold to complete it. And it does still give you some wave clear, but you just don't have that active. So certain champions that wanted that as part of their rotation, or like animation cancels or things like that, you don't have that anymore, but it still is an okay item just because it's going to be cheaper. And then Hydra, I don't remember what the old stats used to be on this, but it's a very good bargain on champions that can leverage it. So you gain bonus attack damage equal to 1% of your maximum health. So if you have 3,000 health, which you probably would with a build like this, then you're going to end up getting 30 attack damage. So they did nerf this. I think it used to be 1.5%, and it used to be 35 base, so it has been nerfed. But the cleave is still really good. It's 4% for melees, physical damage on hit that you do extra. So if you have 3,000 health, that'd be an extra 120 on hit damage. And then it cleaves behind you, dealing 40 plus 3%. So it's going to cleave behind you for 160 every hit. So that's a pretty big hit overall, 2 people in a team fight. So still going to be a very, very strong item in the right hands. And then I just would not get these other two the vast majority of the time. We'll see as we go through that Aegis is really the most OP unless it gets nerfed. Frostfire does give you a bit of a slow, but it has unequal stats. It has less health on it, and it has 50 armor and 25 magic resist, so it's not as well balanced. But the resistances are 75 total versus the 60. It just doesn't have the health on it, so it just doesn't scale as well with some of the other things because health is really the main thing. And then your Turbo Chem Tank does allow you to have a bit more engage, so it's like Righteous Glory meets Sunfire, but you're giving up so much damage. I mean, it's just like an astronomical amount of damage that you're giving up by not having the Sunfire, Empowered Sunfire. So you're only going to do like, 30 or 40 damage per second as the game goes on, instead of like 120 damage per second in a team fight, which I think that's just way too much damage to give up for these. So maybe some situations where you really need that engage, but the vast majority of the time you just want to go Sunfire. And then we'll talk about the fighters last up here. So fighters are like okay, they're not doing as well. Like champions like Darius aren't doing as well as you would think they would, because traditionally they're thought of as like tank stompers, right? Like Darius, Fiora, and stuff like that. But they are not beating up these tanks. They have like a lot of them have negative win rates right now because that Sunfire Aegis is just so strong they just can't kill them fast enough to get through the Sunfire Aegis and the Spirit Visage. But some of the things that are going on top, they did change Sheen up a little bit now to where it doesn't have any mana on it, which is good for a lot of champions except for like maybe GP. So you got to be careful with kind of having mana problems up top. But champions that didn't need the mana, this is really nice because you can get it much faster and you don't have to waste mana on that stat. So anyone that wants Trinity Force, Divine Sunder, Lichbane, that could potentially be pretty good. And then they changed Phage now to where it doesn't allow you to stick to people easier, but it does heal you over time after you deal physical damage to a champion. So stuff with a bleed, stuff like a Darius, or just things that can take some light trades that want to get something like a Phage. This could be pretty strong. So stuff that wants like a Gore Drinker, Divine Sunder, Sterix Gauge. It's pretty good sustain in the lane, but so I guess if you're rushing Gore Drinker, it's solid. But Sterix is not usually a rush item. So if you get it later on in the game with Sterix, it's probably going to feel kind of bags. The healing might feel sort of wimpy in big fights. So it's pretty good for just like light trades early on in the laning phase if you want this. But later on, it's not going to feel as useful probably. Tiamat we talked about before. It does not have the active on it, but it still does provide like pretty respectable wave clear at a cheaper cost, which could be a good trade-off. This is like the old Phage here. To some extent, it's got the armor, and instead of health it has attack speed, but it also has this nimble active on it to where whenever you attack somebody then you gain that movement speed. Now I don't think this applies on like a Fiora Q. I think you have to actually land an auto attack after that, but it does allow you to stick to people. It gives you 20 movement speed, which is pretty nice. So on certain champions that can be pretty good It does build in a Trinity, and then Stride Breaker is pretty good with it as well. Wits End is kind of a situational item that we'll talk about in a second. Not a lot of people are going to get it, probably, but it could be okay. Iron Spike Whip. Now, this is the old, the Cleave active, so deals 75% of damage to champions near you. So if you do want that active in combat just to get that little bit of extra damage, it is very nice. It only costs 1200 and you get the auto attack. And it still does like execute monsters pretty well. So minions and monsters below 50% of their damage take 200%. So you can, if you just prep the wave properly, you can still get like really good wave clear out of it too. But this is if you do want that extra little burst of damage on top of your trades. So the Tiamat is not going to give you any extra burst. It's going to be a lot worse for trades, but it's going to give you more consistent push. But this is going to give you moments of power where you can push. But if you do that, then you're going to be vulnerable and you're not going to be open to using this for a big trade. So you can't have the push plus the trade with this one. You have to choose. So it creates an interesting dichotomy. But it does allow you to get access to the item faster. So if you just want that burst for the trades, you can get it 225 gold faster. Right? And this one does have a bit more AD than Tiamat as well. It has 5 extra AD. So I think it's a good strategic choice just so that Tiamat's just not always like the kind of do-it-all item in the top lane. And then you still have like Hex Drinker, Quicksilver Sash are still basically the same things. This one, the Gensu's Rageblade, there will be some champions that like this on hit. I'm not sure Kale's build. I think Kale might get this at some point. But basically it translates all crit items into on-hit items, and it does 40 physical damage on hit. It was previewed on the PvE at 50 at one point, and then they took it down to 45, and now they've taken it down to 40. And it used to be 30, it might have been 3,000 flat gold, and then they brought it down to 2,600, and they've nerfed it back up to 2,800. So this is kind of where we are now. It's a pretty good item on very specific champions that want that on-hit with every third attack. So if you have a top lane like Lucian or top lane Vayne, you'll see this. I don't know Quinn's situation. Kale will probably want this at some point, I would imagine. But I'm not really sure. We'll have to see here in a second. And then Wits End, they took the healing off of this, so I don't think a lot of people are going to get it as much anymore. But it does give you movement speed for 2 seconds when you hit somebody. It does have pretty good on-hit damage, that 15 to 80. It's got 50 magic resist on it, and then 40% attack speed and 30 attack damage. So it's a weird assortment of stats. I just don't think a lot of people are going to get it, but maybe some Gensu users who want to be able to stick to people in combat and don't want to get Blather and King, maybe this is okay. It's going to be a lot less damage than Blather and King. So I don't know. I think not a lot of people are going to get it. Now, Blather and King, a lot of people consider this a nerf. It's straight up a nerf in terms of the damage on it. For range, it's 6% instead of 8%. So that's a 25% less damage on the ranged. Now, they did give it, I think, 5% extra attack speed. And it doesn't have the active anymore, but whenever you attack something 3 times, it does give you the extra magic damage and the movement speed, but you can't just activate it instantly to chase somebody down or to slow somebody down so you can get away off of a gank. So I think overall is a pretty big nerf to the active and obviously to the damage, but some people will still get this, but I think it's by and large a trap item. I think there are probably better options now. Death Stance is one of the biggest new changes. It only it's basically a hard counter to physical damage now, so it could be pretty good on some bruisers. It's only 3,100 gold now instead of 3,500, so that part's nice. It does not have any sort of lifesteal on it anymore, though, and it has no magic resist. So it's got more armor than it used to have. I think it used to be 30-30. It's the same attack damage, but no magic resist. And now for melee, it ignores 35% of incoming physical damage, or it delays 35% of it, and you take it as true damage over 3 seconds. But if you get a kill or an assist, then it erases all of that true damage, all of that bleed true damage, grants you 30% movement speed for 2 seconds, and restores 10% of your total health over those 2 seconds. So if you have like 3,000 health and you get, hit for 2,000 health, and this reduces whatever 1/3 of that, like 700, then you get a kill or an assist where you have 500 of that true damage burning, it will, remove that 500 and heal you for 300, 10% of your maximum health over the duration. So you basically just got like an 800 heal over time. Now, the removal of the bleed does not count as an actual heal, though, so it will not be reduced by grievous wounds. You just straight up do not take that extra true damage. It was just like it never happened, right? But that 10% heal over time can be reduced by grievous wounds. So all in all, like on a champion that can get those resets, like a Darius or just anything else that's going to be able to run around and get resets, Aatrox and stuff like that against physical damage dealers, it's just going to be impossible to kill him. I mean, as like Aatrox with like Gore Drinker or Eclipse plus Death's Dance plus something like a Spirit Visage and just the innate healing those champions have is just going to be nutty to try to deal with in team fights. So very, very powerful item, although very situational. I will say you almost certainly do not want to get this as ranged because it's only 15% is misdirected instead of 35. So they're hitting you with a really, really big penalty if you want to run this on a ranged champion. But maybe it's still viable, but very, very iffy on ranged champions now. Sterix, I think, is about the same. You still have the Lifeline Shield. Dealing damage. Okay, then it's got the Phage thing going on there. Restores 2% over time. Okay, but it can stack up to 5 times on Bloodlust. Okay. Once per champion. Okay, so you can get up to 10% of your health, max health, is healed over time. So that's actually extremely strong. So yeah, Sterix is pretty dang good then, in that case. And the shield is for everything as well. Per stack of Bloodlust shield. Wait, hold on. Upon taking damage that would reduce your health below 30%, gain 200 plus... Okay, so you can heal up to 10% and you get a big shield. Okay. I hadn't read that correctly before. Times 8% per Bloodlust stack. Okay, wow, that's that's extremely powerful then. Holy crap. So you can gain 200 plus like 40% of your maximum health as a shield for 5 seconds. What? It's like over 1,000 shield. And you heal for 10% of your health over 6 seconds. So that's like, I don't know, 1.4. So if you have 3,000 health, what's that, like 40? So that's 14 per, yeah, so that's like 42 health per second off of the Bloodlust. Okay, that's pretty damn good. So anyways, yeah, very, very powerful item. You want to get that on a lot of these bruisery type of champs. Ravenous Hydra is cheaper now a little bit. It gives you Omnivamp. You're paying, Omnivamp is a very, very expensive stat, but this applies to physical damage, magic damage, and true damage. So this will be very good on someone like a Fiora or a Camille that does the true damage that doesn't benefit from traditional lifesteal in those cases. So it's very good. It does not have the active on it, just like the previous Tiamat, so it no longer has the active on it anymore. But the Omnivamp is pretty good, and it has ability haste on it. So overall, I think you're paying a lot, but if you really, really want the Omnivamp, it can be pretty good. But the cleave is basically the same as Tiamat. So it just depends on if you think the Omnivamp's worth it or not on your champion. Black Cleaver is pretty much the same, but instead of the extra movement speed, now on hit against fully shredded enemies, once you have them completely, they have the 6 stacks of Cleaver on them, then they take an extra 5% of their missing health and physical damage. So if they're missing 1,000 health on a target, they would take 50 instantly. So that's really, really good. So damage over time, deal 40%. Okay, so dot damage like Darius Bleed does less on Butcher. But it's the same like base stats. I think it's good. I mean, at the end of the day, it's more damage instead of being able to stick to people. And on someone like an Urgot, this could be really, really big. Now, it is on hit, and his on hit is reduced over time. But nevertheless, it is pretty good. Titanic we talked about earlier, and then Serelda's Grudge is rare because a lot of these champions are going to have true damage or like percent health damage anyways. But it could be pretty good. Damaging abilities slow enemies for 1 second. So once again, I don't know if like a Darius bleed, if they keep bleeding, if that would apply, but it's rare that one of these bruisers top lane would get this, but it could be okay. And then as far as the mythics go, Eclipse, it's worth noting this has been nerfed a ton. So if you're looking at an old guide on Eclipse, be very careful. It only does 6% max health now. On the PvE, it did as much as 15%. And you only get 15% extra movement speed for 2 seconds now. So it only has a 6-second cooldown, so you'll probably be able to trigger this twice in fights. So that means you're going to be able to deal up to 12% max health when you do that, probably in most fights. And you're going to get a shield for 150 plus 40% of your bonus physical damage. So that's going to be like a 230 shield if you have like 200 bonus damage later on in the game. And you get 15% bonus movement speed for 2 seconds. And it has 10% Omni Vamp on it. So it is pretty good, but it does not have any sort of like health on it. It doesn't have any armor, magic resist, or anything like that. It's just straight up an all offense item. I haven't done the full breakdown of the math on that, but it's probably pretty close to efficient. Lethality is a very, like, because of, like, for some reason, Serrated Dirk is really undervalued. Like, I think that it's something like lethality is only 7 gold per point of lethality, but it can cancel out like a full point of armor, which is worth 20 at a certain level. So I think lethality should be much more expensive than that, but for some reason it's not. So you've got 1925 value worth of attack damage there, and then Omni Vamp is 46 per stat. So yeah, it's 2,400 gold without the lethality. So if you count the lethality at 20 each, that's going to be about like 360 gold. And 20 is probably too much to count it. But you're probably paying somewhere in the neighborhood of like 700 gold realistically. Once again, lethality is dramatically mispriced because Serrated Dirk is such a bizarre item. But you're probably paying about 500 to 700 gold for the value for this Ever Rising Moon on Eclipse. So that's really expensive now to pay for that ability, but it is a very, very powerful ability. So it just depends on, you know, if you think that's worth it or not. So it's still probably going to be a go-to item, and it's going to be pretty strong, but you'll notice that it is kind of becoming a trap item on a lot of the popular champs that used to get it, so it's okay. Gore Drinker, and I know that the wiki has this, but I don't want to jump back and forth from the wiki like right now in terms of getting priced out itemization, but plus 1,000, I'm just doing just like some ballpark numbers here. And then Ability Haze is plus like 540. Then you have Base Ability Regen. So it looks like it's about 100%. It's probably a little bit over 100% efficient. So pretty good stats overall. Decent components. You know, the Phage can help you out with sustain in the laning phase. The Iron Spike Whip is good for trades and for wave clear if you need it. Kindle Gem, just an all-around, like, pretty solid item. So good components to it. And then Thirsting Slash, it's basically like a Darius Q. You spin around, you deal 110% of physical damage. So that's like, it's almost like an auto attack reset, not quite, but it does some extra damage. This can cancel animations too. I don't know if it cancels things like Renekton, but I've heard that it can cancel like Riven combos and things like that. So you could do some fancy mechanical stuff with this. And then it restores 20% of your physical damage and then 12% of your missing health per champion hit. So if you hit like 5 champions with this, and I don't remember like the exact range on it. Let me see. That's pretty good though. So if you hit like 2 or 3 champs with this, I mean, that could restore 24% to 36%. 26 to 36% of, or 24 to 36% of your missing health. So really, really good for gaining back that extra health. And then you also gain 1% total attack damage per 5% of your missing health. So if you're missing like 50% of your health, you would gain 10% extra total attack damage. So that's really, really good, especially on champions that keep dropping in health and keep healing it up over time. So this is a very popular item. You see this on Kayn in the jungle a lot, but people are taking it more and more on many top laners as well, especially as Eclipse gets nerfed. So on champions like Darius, obviously this is doubling down on something he does really well to begin with, but there's a lot of champions up there that are using this now. So it's becoming more and more popular. It's very, very powerful, especially on anything that's gonna has the potential to get like a Spirit Visage at some point. It would increase that a ton. So yeah, it's just a really good all-around type of sustain item. Stride Breaker is another one that's kind of weird. I've seen this work really well on Garen because I think his spin scales with attack speed, but I'm not really sure all the champs that would want this. But it's pretty much anyone that can jump in and wants to have that extra gap closer and then slow people and stick to them over time. So as you do that damage, you stick to them, kind of like the old Phage or kind of like Trinity Force, but it has better like more health on it, and it has that lunge for that extra gap close that Trinity Force does not have. So once again, I'm not entirely sure who would run this. It's kind of weird on a lot of champs, but like maybe like a Fiora, or maybe like I said, Garen is a pretty good one. Maybe Darius would want something like this. Because yeah, the bleed, I believe, would still give you the movement speed on them. So even if they flash away, dealing physical damage, they would still keep taking the bleed off of the Darius, and that would allow you to catch back up to him with the 30 move speed. So maybe someone like Darius would like this. Gore Drinker is obviously really good, but it doesn't have the gap close and sort of the stickiness to it. It just does more damage. So I don't know, maybe Stride Breaker. But then it's like, does Darius really need the attack speed that much? So it's kind of a funky item, but there can be some corner cases where it can be good. And then Divine Sunder seems like it'd be good. It has the attack damage, the health, the ability haste, and it does damage equal to 10% of the target's max health. So if you're like fighting a tank and you're trying to do like, it do 300 damage every time you hit this. And it restores 50% of the bonus damage done. Now, this is after armor is checked on that, I believe. It is not pre-mitigation damage. So if you're hitting a tank for 300, it's not going to heal you for 50% of the 300 for 150. You're going to have to go through the armor. So if they have like 100 armor, which they're going to have way more than that, but if they have 100 armor, the 300 would get reduced by 50%, so it would only do 150, so you would heal for 50% of that, so 75. So it's still pretty good, but for some reason, a lot of people just don't have it. I think it's because it does not have the stickiness to it, and like the healing is probably less than Gore Drinker in like really big, like best case scenarios. Gore Drinker is going to be more, and Gore Drinker is probably also going to do more damage because it's AoE. So like the big team fight item is Gore Drinker, and the sticky item's probably going to be Trinity. Like Trinity, and we'll just scale over to Trinity now here. It doesn't have as much health on it, and it's got attack speed, so it's not like as useful maybe on like some big tanks that might like Divine Sunder. But it's got two really good things on it. It can scale up and do 200% of your base AD, so the more AD that you have, the better this is going to scale. Versus Sunder doesn't scale based on things you have. It just depends. If you're fighting tanks, it scales based on their max health, so you have less control over that, and it's a lot less strong against squishies. And this also gives you the 25 movement speed, so it gives you that stickiness. You have to auto attack for it. It doesn't work on abilities, but it does give you the up to 30% base AD. Now keep in mind that base AD, a lot of abilities scale with bonus AD, not base. So watch the scaling, and I don't know all of these with every champion, but some champions scale based off of total attack damage versus bonus. Any champion that scales off of total attack damage, their abilities are going to do way more off of that scaling there. The base attack damage does affect the Trinity Force itself, so it's going to be 30% more Trinity damage effectively. So instead of doing 200% base, it's going to be doing like 265-ish. 270% base, something around there. So that's going to be really good in and of itself. But yes, if you have any of those total attack damage, bleeds, or other type of stuff, then that's going to give you a lot of power there as well. And then, of course, just your base auto attacks are going to do 30% more. So anyways, that's it for the items. Let's go ahead and get into the champions here because I do want to like have enough time to cover the champions. But there are a lot of items, and I did not get to cover the fighter items as much in my other videos because I just don't think fighters are going to be that great in the jungle or in mid. You'll probably see them top. But anyways, let's go ahead and we'll get out of here. And then we'll do the tier list here. So I mentioned earlier that I think the tanks are going to be the big tickets here. So if we look at the PBI here, the pick ban influence, the number one that I have up here is Shen. And he was very strong before the preseason, and now that the tank items are way better, he's just kind of over the top. He's got like a 57% win rate right now. So that's really, really good, especially on someone who is designed to be like okay in solo queue, but really shine in like pro play. The fact that he's doing that well in like platinum, which is kind of what I use as my baseline here, is really pretty shocking. And a lot of it is just those combination of items. He has that Sunfire Aegis. When you scale down here and look at that, that gives him a 59% win rate once he completes that. It's way better than the other alternatives. It's 2% more than Frostfire and about 4% more than Turbo Chem Tank. And it just gives you a lot of tankiness in general, a lot of stickiness in fights, scales so much with health. It's going to give you that wave clear. He really loves Sunfire anyways because the more he can push, the freer he's going to be to roam. So if he can push and then ult into a fight, he's not going to lose as much in his own lane. So you really just want to put as much pressure as possible inside lanes so that you can roam and they're not going to be able to counter by threatening your towers. So it just fits in perfectly like a glove with his kit. And, you know, he's got, you know, multiple ways to get into fights. He has the ult, but then he also has kind of that stickiness with his taunt in fights. And he can just stall out and extend fights with his W to block all kinds of auto attacks. And there are a lot of auto attackers out there right now that are popular. So yeah, it just brings great utility to fights. He's got the ult. He has basically the free teleport with a huge shield off of the ult. But he can still fight really well because his Q, you know, gives him that extra attack speed, allows him to get those extra auto attacks in there. And just really duel a lot of top laners. So he's scary in duels and one-on-one. He scales really well, and he has huge team presence. So he's just going to be massive. And then the new Titanic Hydra is really fantastic as well. 65% win rate, or 64% win rate, I guess, and change off of the Titanic. And it just works really well with Sunfire. It doubles down on the wave clear. He didn't really care as much for losing the active. Like, it was nice that you had the active, but he's perfectly fine with just getting a Tiamat that's 225 less gold for that. And it, once again, just works really well with his kit. I think that he his shield scales based off of his max health, I believe. So stacking a ton of health is already really good, but he gets a lot of empowered auto attacks, and he attacks way faster. I think when his Q goes through something, it like increases his attack speed by like 50%. So then he's just going to get off even more attacks in these with the Titanic Hydra. So he's just one of the few like big tanks that actually scales really well with attack damage and with on-hit abilities because he gets so much attack speed so often. And of course, now being able to get some ability haste in his build is really nice because before he couldn't really get it. Right, he would have, he would go Sunfire and then he would go Titanic, and none of those have ability haste, but he has a really long cooldown, super high impact ultimate. So obviously ability haste is going to be really nice. So even just getting that extra little bit that's about the equivalent of 13% CDR is going to be very nice on him. And I don't know what his minor runes are. He probably still takes the attack speed minor rune, but he does have an option to get 8% or 8 extra ability haste if he wants it in his build. But ironically, it looks like he does fall off late game, which is pretty interesting. But nevertheless, just one of the best 1-2 punches right now in terms of itemization in the game, and just fantastic presence from right when he hits 6. He can really just win almost any lane, which is kind of rare for top lane, and that's something that I've critiqued a lot about in top lane. Is traditionally with a lot of these champions, you're kind of on your own island. So if your bot lane's feeding or your mid lane's feeding or whatever, it's really hard to get involved with a lot of top laners unless you blow your teleport to go down there, which can be really high impact. But Shen has multiple ways to do it. He can do it with TP and he can do it with his ult. So that versus other roles, like when you're playing support or when you're playing jungler, like you can roam around, right? You can sit on mid lane and really put your thumb on the scale and make sure that your mid laner wins if you want to do that. As a jungler, definitely, but even as a support, if your bot lane's feeding, you can go help your jungler out, you can go help your mid laner out, you can provide vision. Like, you have all of these ways to win even if you're in a losing lane, right? But as a top laner, if you're in a losing lane, sometimes you're just kind of stuck. A lot of times you just kind of have to just sit in a holding pattern and just pray that someone else can carry you, right? Or that you can maybe make it to a certain level to win. Shin doesn't have that problem because he can roam. He can win the lane a lot of times in a lot of matchups, but even if you're in a bad situation, you can still impact the map. So I just think that that adds an extra layer of consistency that a lot of other champs don't have, and that's why I think Shin is over the top right now. And then after that, Malphite. So very similar to, well, I guess Malphite's a little bit lower. I'll go to Maokai first. So this is one that not a lot of people are, he has a huge win rate, but he's just not picked as much. So he's got 55%. It has come down a little bit. But I still just really love Maokai just because he has such huge consistency. Like, it's all about consistency when you're playing. And what I mean by that is it's hard to mess him up. Like, pretty much. Like, there are not a lot of skill shots to him. There's not a lot of, like, skill expression in general. He just works, and they can't outplay you. Like, so many of his things, you can't outplay it. Point click, he W, if he gets in range, he just presses W on it and he's gonna get you, right? Shin, you can dodge it with your mobility. Like his taunt, you can dodge with mobility, you can flash it, there's a lot of things you can do at least to try to interact with Shin. And his taunt in a team fight, Maokai, you're not interacting with that, right? If you flash, he's following you. If you do some kind of fancy dash or whatever, he's going to get you. The only thing you can do is Hourglass to get away once he gets in range. And then once he gets on you with a W, he just presses R. Once again, extremely difficult to outplay that because it's a massive hitbox, and it has such a huge range on it too that, like, even if you flash it, like, unless you flash over top of it and put yourself out of position, it's going to run you down, right? So if he's setting up for a dive top lane and he starts that ultimate, good luck getting out of that, right? When the jungler starts coming in and flanking you, you're going to get hit by that stuff. So it's just, around Maokai, it just feels like it's impending doom. If you're in a bad situation, because he has so much CC and so much of it is so difficult to outplay, he's just going to get you, right? If he's, like, even within, like, 900 range of you, and the jungler comes up, and he just flash W's on top of you, and he has his ultimate up, and he chains all that together, and then knocks you back with the Q, like, you're dead. There's no outplaying that. So that's the thing, is just, in general, he's very strong with that, and then he just synergizes with those items as well. Like, he's got innate healing in his kit off of his passive, which is a lot of healing. Over time, so that synergizes really well with the Spirit Visage that we talked about before, and the Gargoyle are both really strong on him. And because, just like everybody else with Sunfire Aegis, he's going to get the wave clear, and he's going to be able to stick to people and put out a ton of damage. Isn't that right, Rory? Mm-hmm. So that's really nice, but he also has the extra scouting off of his seeds, which gives extra vision.
Come on, too.
Okay. But we gotta try to be quiet though, okay? Daddy's finishing up this video. But yeah, you can click if you want to. She's got her own little mouse here that's, like, not plugged in, but that she's playing with. But yeah, there it goes. Look, there's your mouse. Good job, Rory.
Oh, yeah. My mouse is going faster.
Yeah, your mouse is going faster. But anyway, so yeah, tons of damage, good synergy with a lot of the big items there, extra scouting and utility with his seeds later on, tons of CC, difficult to interact with. I mean, he's just the perfect tank. He's just a complete beast, and a lot of people don't pick him right now, but he's very, very strong champion. Doesn't quite have the mobility of Shin, but I would say he has more CC overall, especially, like, very guaranteed CC, and that vision, especially when you're trying to set up for Barons and things like that later on, is really big. Rory, no, not the keyboard, Rory. You can play with your mouse, but not the keyboard.
But
Ornn is the other one that I'll pick that's, like, super strong right now. No, Rory.
I can press my button. I can press my button.
Okay, one time. She's pressing enter. Okay.
That's just great.
That's right. Ornn actually does have a little bit of a lower win rate now, but I think that especially if Pro were happening right now, he'd be super strong. But even in solo queue, he's going to be good. Now, they did change him up on this patch to where he can upgrade any mythic now, so people don't have to build special weird items just to like get an Ornn upgrade. And all of them are streamlined to be about 1,000 extra gold in value. And he's free now to build other items, so he doesn't just have to build Abyssal Sunfire anymore. He can build other stuff. Now, he's still going to get the Sunfire, Aegis most of the time. But now he can get a Thornmail if he wants to, you know, have some more physical damage. He can even get, you know, a magic resist item if he wants to do that. Now, Spirit Visage, he doesn't have any healing or shielding, so that's kind of weird unless you're going to get the Gargoyle. But he just has a lot more freedom. And Abyssal is still pretty good on him. But yeah, he's got great engage, lots of CC, pretty respectable damage. But now they changed his passive around to where he gets like a lot of extra health. He gets like 10% extra HP, armor, and magic resist. It's something crazy like that. I don't remember the exact details. But in exchange for that, he no longer gets 2 item upgrades at 13. So at exactly 13, he's going to be weaker because he doesn't get the 2 item upgrades. But until then, he's going to have a lot better scaling because he gets a lot more free stats in his kit just based off of his passive. And he gives out he's going to give out a lot more efficient bonuses to his teammates because they don't have to get weird items anymore. Like some champions that got Infinity Edge got like huge bonuses off of him, but other ones it was just weird, like the old supports and things like that. If they didn't have Locket or Redemption, it just felt pretty bad. So you going to the finish line? Yeah, we are getting pretty close to the finish line, aren't we, Ray? But anyway, so just really, really strong, streamlined, weaker at 13 in like the best case scenario where you have your 2 items completed and they are the exact items that you want. He personally will be a bit weaker. So there's that certain window, but every other scenario is going to be a lot better for him. So overall, I think that's good.
But that's all there.
That's right. And then Malphite's the other one who has the highest win rate, and he's just all over the place right now. Just so strong because his engage is so good. Everyone knows this. He's just like brain dead, just blow everybody up, and it's just because it's so fast and he has such high baseline damage. So he's kind of like Maokai, and I think that Maokai has less counterplay to him overall, but he doesn't have that big, you know, boom factor. Like Maokai can just, the right ult can just single-handedly win the game. And yes, there, you know, it is easier to get things like Banshee's Veil or Edge of Night or whatever. Rory, honey, we gotta be quiet, okay? You wanna watch something on Daddy's Poe? Ooh, you wanna watch Daddy's Poe? Okay, can you watch it on the couch over there? You wanna watch it on the couch?
Let's stay on here.
Okay. No, we can't watch it on Daddy's lap though. You gotta choose Daddy's lap or cartoons. Or which will you choose?
There.
Okay. She
She
chooses the cartoons. We'll hang out. She can have Daddy's lap in a second. Daddy's just got to finish this. Okay, here you go, Ray. Oh, let me turn that down a little bit. Sorry. This is just the only time I could do this video today. Okay. Usually I try to make these at night when she's asleep. This is, I mean, if you've ever wondered why do I stream at such strange hours and like make videos really late at night, this is why. Because I spend a lot of time with her during the day, and you know, I know some people just don't like it when she barges in and interrupts and stuff. I think most people are tolerant of it. Most people like kids, but I know it can be annoying if you're just looking for a good streamlined video. But anyways, yeah, he's just really strong. There's not a lot that's changed about him. He just scales super well with armor. Armor's very good right now. Sunfire Aegis, it's the same drill pretty much every time. Sunfire Aegis, Thornmail, and then Spirit Visage is not as much of a waste because his passive shield does scale with that now, which is cool. And then Gargoyle, and the Sunfire just does so much damage that it just doesn't matter. You don't even have to build the Death Cap, you know, or like Ludens or any other troll Malphite builds anymore. You just do a hell of a lot of damage, and you can build armor. So just super good. Obviously very, very powerful team fighter. He is going to get soloed, or he can get soloed probably by a lot of the other tanks who have percentage damage in their kit. He doesn't have any of that. So like your Shen especially is probably going to dumpster him, or like, you know, even Maokai or Ornn are probably going to have pretty decent game against him. But overall, he's very strong. Now, Kale is actually going to be probably the most powerful scaling champion right now in the top lane, which was a little interesting because people weren't really sure where she was going to go with Gunblade missing. It's like, okay, is she just going to be like terrible, or are people going to find a new build? People found a new build. I mean, there's almost always going to be a way with Kale. And since she's against a lot of tanks in the top lane now, she's kind of going to get a free laning phase because she can kite them out. And just kind of match them and just sort of have a handshake farm off lane with a lot of these tanks, and eventually she's going to do so much damage she can overpower them. So that's part of what makes Kale really good. I think Malphite's probably one of her harder matchups. Yeah, her win rate against Malphite's not hot just because he can actually hard engage on her. She can't really outplay that as well. So if you look at weak against, that is actually literally her worst matchup is Malphite. But like every other one's pretty good, even into stuff like Shin and Maokai and stuff like that. She's still pretty decent. And then she is going to hard win, obviously, as the game goes on. She's going to just take off to the races. So the thing, people are going a more AP-centric build with her, and they just get Nashers into Rift Maker, into Gensu's. Seems to be the most powerful one. Although I will note here that Deathcap and Lichbane have much, much higher win rates than Gensu. So Gensu's is very popular for the on hit. You don't have a lot of other crit before then. You do get the double strike off of Nashers, which is very nice, but this doesn't have any AP on it itself. So I think you just want the better scaling with Nashers, and especially Lichbane. If you're against squishies or you think you're going to be able to hit some of them, Lichbane is just an item that we talked about in the Mage video that just deletes people. It's so strong. It was recently nerfed a little bit, but when you get Nashers plus Lichbane, you're just going to blow people up. So it's very, very strong. The new Nashers they took away the CDR, but it has 20 extra ability power and now scales much better with ability power. It's 25% scaling for the on hit rather than 15% scaling for the on hit. And then the Rift Maker is really where you want to be. You end up doing the true damage just like you used to be able to do, and you end up healing a lot with the Omni Vamp. And you have a lot of physical damage and magic damage. Hey, can you go tell Mommy about the potty real quick and she can take you? No. Okay, just give me 30 seconds here. I know we're almost at the end of the video. Just give me 30 seconds. Let me put her on the bathroom real quick. Okay, let's go. Run. Alright, sorry about that. She was hanging out with my wife downstairs for the first 40 minutes of this video, but then I guess she escaped and came up here, and she does like hanging out with me a lot. But I do need to get stuff done. I do need to make these videos because I know people want to see it. But anyways, yeah, super strong. Basically get a free pass in the laning phase, mega scaling champion. I mean, Kale's just, everyone knows Kale, super strong. But that's the new build. It's the Nashers, Rift Maker, and then either Deathcap or Lichbane are probably the best options after that. Okay, next tier of champions here, other than just like the super tanks. If you do want to do the fighters, I have these down here. Now, if you are super good on some of these champs, I do believe that you can maybe be able to outplay the tanks and scale up harder. It's just going to be very difficult on your first couple of items because they're going to get that Bramble Vest into you, and then once they get that Sunfire Aegis, they're probably going to beat you up in the first couple of levels, which seems weird for tanks, but that's just how it's going to go until you get to 2 or 3 items on your Camille and your Fiora and stuff like that. Oh, shit. Well, there goes one of my lights. But anyways, I think that Aatrox is one that I'll mention here. Now, he does have a lower win rate, but I've seen many Aatroxes just really go off. Now, part of that was with Eclipse, which has been nerfed several times, but it looks like people are switching over to Gore Drinker, and that still is going to be a very strong item on him. So what's up with that? What's up with Aatrox? Well, it's just a ton of healing. It is about tied neck and neck here with Gore Drinker and Eclipse, but he just doubles down on the healing, and just a lot of those items that he gets have been enhanced, right? So if we look at Cleaver good against tanks. It's got the 5% missing health, which is going to do more flat damage the higher their health is. He has the armor reduction still in that, so that's really nice. He doesn't have a problem sticking to people to begin with because of all of his dashes and stuff, so he's probably happy to trade off the old stickiness of the former Black Cleaver in exchange for more damage from the new Black Cleaver, so that's good. And then he also has this, if he's up against a lot of physical damage dealers, which you're still going to see mostly physical junglers, obviously physical ADCs, and some people are still going to play like the Zeds, the Talons, and stuff like that in the mid lane. Or any sort of other fighters in the top lane, other Dariuses, Camille's, Garen's, all that kind of stuff. Death's Dance is going to be super, super strong for the reasons I talked about before, because he's going to get the extra movement speed and the extra healing whenever he gets those kills, and now he's going to heal for 1 billion. So once he gets like Gore Drinker plus Death's Dance with his passive, he's just going to absolutely annihilate everybody. And then the Sterix Gauge is going to be really strong as well because of, getting that massive shield, which is going to keep you alive long enough to get that reset. And once you get the reset, it's over when you're in Aatrox in a fight. And now you get that ton of extra healing as well. So just super, super strong champion. He does kind of fall off, ironically, a little bit late game. But very good, but you do have to have the skill to, land all of your 3 strikes. So if you have that, I think he can be very powerful. I've definitely seen him 1v9 many games, both on the PvE and on live. And then the other one that I'll mention here is Camille. I think she's probably best in class of the fighters right now. And, her first couple of items are going to be a little bit rough. But then as you can see, once she gets that second or third item, she does start creeping up a little bit there. I believe Trinity is pretty much what she gets. I think I've seen Stridebreaker. Yeah. Not a huge sample size. Almost everybody gets Trinity. Stridebreaker does have 5% higher win rate, but there's only a handful of people that got it. But this kind of thing, could be the thing that could help you. Actually, it's kind of... I was thinking maybe Stridebreaker with Fiora. So yeah, I mean, it's just pretty much Trinity with Camille. Just to stick with people and make sure that you're getting those extra Qs off. Now, it does look like Divine Sunder is also very good on her, so it just kind of depends probably if you're against tanks or not, but that's going to be really strong. And then the Ravenous Hydra is what you want to get here. So she used to get Titanic, I believe, back in the day, and some people still get it, but the main reason you would do that is you had that auto attack reset with your Q, but you no longer have the auto attack reset anymore, so I think pretty much everybody's on the Ravenous train. And the reason that Ravenous is so nice is that you heal off of true damage now. So overall, just going to be a pretty solid item. And then if you're just kind of depending on what you're up against, either the Death's Dance or the Sterix Gauge can be pretty good. Sterix is a little more awkward just because you don't have as much health if you're getting Ravenous Hydra versus Titanic, but overall, it's just good. She has a lot of mobility. She can rotate around the map. She's very, very good at assassinating people, obviously. A lot of champions have a difficult time interacting with her ultimate. If they can't blow her back through it, then she sort of forces the 1v1. So that makes her very, very good on ganks. Sort of like what we were talking about with Malachi. There's very, very little counterplay if she flashes and then ults you. Because if you flash after that, then she's just going to follow you with the ult. So she can just lock you up and make sure that you get those kills. Excellent gank assist. And then very, very good split pusher later on in the game. Really difficult to deal with. Has tons of mobility, so even if they send 2 or 3 people to go collapse on her, a lot of times she is going to be able to get away. So just overall, really, really strong champ. Her team fight is somewhat limited. It's okay, but very, very good split pusher and duelist. Okay, and then we've got... the last couple ones here, Darius, just traditional Gore Drinker Darius. Now, I would have thought that he would be much higher in a tank meta because he's historically really good against tanks because he has the true damage on his ult for the execute and the bleed. But the thing is, like, so many tanks have so much healing right now, and they also just have a lot of max health. So it's hard to execute someone with your ult. It's like, okay, you can do 700 true damage, but that Malachi's got 3,000 health, and his passive's healing him for like 500 or something like that every time he does it. So it is difficult. Now, okay, so Stride Breaker does actually have a really high win rate on him. It's like 3% over Gore Drinker. So that's kind of what I was thinking. Trinity's sort of out, even though a lot of people are buying it. It's a much worse win rate. And Gore Drinker is good. It doubles down on what he's already good at. But really, it's that gap closer. Everybody knows that with Darius. If you can just get close, you take Ghost, you've got your Stride Breaker, all these things. And Stride Breaker only has a 20-second cooldown on that gap close. So you can do it pretty much any time you want to fight. Start a fight, you can with Stride Breaker. So he is still going to be pretty solid. It's just like, can he put up enough damage and get the resets faster? It's hard to get resets against these mega tanks just because they have so much healing and so much power. I'm really surprised Bramble Vest is not in here because I feel like that's just mandatory against a lot of these like Grasp tanks top lane. But anyways, decent setup. It's just that it takes so long to kill people. It's hard to get the resets later. So not only can some chance kite you, but you're just never going to kill the Shen or the Maokai or the Ornn fast enough in team fights a lot of times. So anyways, and they're going to have Bramble Vest for you for sure. So that's probably why Gore Drinker's not as good, is because every tank is going to be rushing Bramble Vest in a lot of matchups. Victor's another one where you don't see him a lot top, but he's been taken over middle, and I don't see a reason why he couldn't be played top. Because he can get away with his Q. Like, he's able to kite people pretty well. So I don't know all the intricacies of Victor. I know we're pretty much out of time, but they pretty much changed his passive to where he doesn't have to like buy his upgrades anymore. He used to have to buy this augmented core, which costs a lot of money and to take up an inventory slot. But now it's kind of like GP. He gets a certain amount of this resource whenever he farms or gets kills or assists. Then he can spend that resource to buy his upgrades. So I think he gets like one of those things, one currency per minion, 5 for large minions, and right now he gets 25 for kills and assists. I think they need to dial back that, because if he gets an extra kill or two early and gets one of those upgrades, like the death ray upgrade early on, that could be a huge problem. So anyways, he just got a huge win rate right now. In mid lane, he had like almost a 58% win rate. They hot nerfed him like after one day, but he's still very strong. And they nerfed one of his core items, the Lich Bane, so they kind of double nerfed him. But just Luden's Lich Bane, very, very strong champion, scales pretty well later on into the game. If you just want that type of thing, if you want a mage in the top lane, then he's going to be one of the better choices. Then the final one that I'll mention is Teemo, and it feels a little weird to have Teemo anywhere on the tier list, but finally, I think with the new items and most of the all caps videos are actually listing the correct build, then his win rate is actually pretty high right now. It's 53.5, and I think that he actually does have some decent game into tanks because he has so much max percentage burn. And they pretty much buffed all of the items that he wants to get. So Leandri's is basically a perfect item for Teemo, because what Teemo really wants, ideally, in good Teemo play, in my opinion, is to just put down a hell of a lot of shrooms and make those shrooms really do a lot of damage to people. So Leandri's kind of gives it all. It gives you the mana that you need, because it can be kind of expensive to put down a bunch of shrooms. It gives the CDR on it, which is huge, because, you know, those shrooms stay up for a really long time. I think it's like 10 minutes or something. It might be 5 minutes, but they're up for a really long time. So the limiting factor is mana and ability haste on how many shrooms you can put on the map. So this has both of it. Has a nice ability power ratio on it, and then it ends up burning them for a reasonable amount of their maximum health. And then while they're burning, then they end up losing magic resist. So they can lose up to, this says 25. They hot nerfed it down to 15%. But they have 15% extra spell pen. So if people are running over multiple shrooms, you know, the longer they're burning on the shrooms, the longer that Leandri's is ticking, and the more spell pen that they're taking, which not only impacts the Leandri's damage, but also impacts the shroom damage. So very, very powerful interaction, and then getting the demonic embrace with that is also going to be very strong, because, you know, it's going to double down on the burn, which is great for the shrooms. Now, Nashor's Tooth is also quite good. In that it does give you ability power and attack speed, so that's going to help with kind of your on hit. I would probably prefer to get this like third item, just because it doesn't help your shrooms out as much. It does help your autos, but once again, I think the shrooms are the key for a lot of Teemo. But finally, you're just not seeing Teemos doing stupid crap like Blade of the Ruined King or Gensu's Rush or just like all this other stuff. Finally, people are almost unanimously going for AP Teemo. And that right there is enough to give him an extra, 2 or 3% win rate, in my opinion, because there were so many bait, like all caps, weird builds with Teemo. And now it seems like the vast, vast majority of people are on board with AP, and that's always been the best build, in my opinion. So, anyways, this is just like pushing people, hey, do the right thing. People are finally doing it, and now they have better toys to go with it. So, I think that he's actually pretty strong right now. So, I would still rather have Kale, as kind of your range champion de jour in the top lane, or Victor, but Teemo is still, or he's definitely a lot more respectable than he once was, in my opinion. And then that's pretty much it for this video. The last few that I'll mention, Akali is awesome right now if you're really good on her, if you're a high skill cap champ. Now, she is only 50%, but like 50% for Akali is a pretty high number. So people thought that she was going to die as well with Gunblade. She actually has a higher win rate now than she had with Gunblade. Pretty much all of the Gunblade users are better off now than they were without Gunblade. At least Kale is. Kale has a much higher win rate. Akali is like 3% higher. Kale's like 7% higher or something. I think even Katarina is pretty close in the mid lane to where she once was. Kat's benefited the least, but she's still pretty good, right? But Akali's, it's a similar story with a lot of these champs, is they just end up taking this new item, Riftmaker. Now, it's worth noting that Night Harvester is actually a little bit of a higher win rate. So Rift is pretty good later in the game. Lich is actually the highest starting item overall, but it has a pretty low sample size. But yeah, just Rift into either Demonic Embrace or Lichbane. Now, Demonic is pretty good because you can stall out fights quite a bit with Akali by sort of dancing around, with your stars, waiting on the energy, using your smoke. So just having these kind of like slow building fights are a pretty interesting assassination playstyle, just prepping and setting up for stuff instead of just one-shotting someone. Now, there is more interaction that your enemy can do, but that stalling out does allow you to build up the power on something like Riftmaker. If you go up, hit them with your Q, and then smoke, and then wait, the 5 seconds, 4 or 5 seconds or whatever before you go in for your real all-in to get the extra 15% true damage can be really good. So, anyways, and then the 15% extra damage also does apply to the burning from Demonic Embrace. So, it's pretty good. So yeah, I think the core build is just going to be Riftmaker, Demonic Embrace, and Lichbane. Hourglass is still pretty nice too, but as I always say, Hourglass second is one of the biggest trap items in the game on almost any champion that gets it. It's got a 5% less win rate here, and I'll guarantee you the vast majority of champions that usually get Hourglass, if you get it second, you're going to lose 2 or 3% win rate, at least. Then you've got Fiora, very good tank breaker, not quite as successful, I don't think, as Camille. The main reason that Fiora is almost always a little bit lower, in my opinion, is she doesn't have as much utility. It's harder for her. She doesn't have as much mobility to get away from people if people collapse on her in the bot lane, and she doesn't have that ult to lock somebody down and force the 1v1 or to help out your jungler when they're trying to gank to make sure that you get that kill. So it's still pretty good. Still a very common item setup just with the Trinity and stuff like that. Stride Breaker actually has a huge win rate on her as well. And this one actually has a decent play rate of 2,700. But Gore Drinker and Stride Breaker are both better on her statistically. But yeah, same drill. Ravenous Hydra, Death's Dance, Sterix, that type of stuff is going to be good. Garen, still okay. Cho'Gath okay. Mordekaiser okay. But we're pretty much out of time. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day. And I'll see you next time.